One word to describe Artie Shaw, clarinetist and popular big band leader from the 1930s and 1940s, might be turbulent. This word describes the personal life of a man whose marriages to 8 women, including Lana Turner and Ava Gardner, all ended in either divorce or annulment. It describes the professional life of a man who became rich from the music fans he often hated. And it describes the health of a man who pushed himself so hard that it led to hospitalization and even to a medical discharge from the Navy in 1944. Artie Shaw was a virtuoso clarinetist whose good looks and 8 wives made him a darling of the gossip page. He was also a band leader extraordinaire and a modern instrumentalist who grew restless with the repetitive nature of popular dance music and uncomfortable with the spotlight. Artie Shaw was never wired the same as other band leaders. Where most were content to find a winning style and stick with it, Shaw was restless. There was never so much as an Artie Shaw band as there was a series of Artie Shaw bands. I count 3 distinct groups even before the Second World War. He would start a band, find success, get fed up with what that success brought, and disband it. Rinse and repeat. Arthur Arshowski was born May 23, 1910 in New York to Jewish immigrants Harold and Sarah. He was an only child and his parents were not well off. His mother was a seamstress and his father pursued different business ventures, none of which were successful. When Arthur was 8 years old, his family moved to New Haven, Connecticut. He was sent to the Dwight Street School, where he was taunted for being Jewish. He was told, "We don't want Christ killers saying the Lord's Prayer around here." Artie later said Jewish kids growing up in average American communities always became aware they were some curious kind of alien. Due to his poverty and the fact that he was Jewish, Arthur had a hard time fitting in with other kids his age and in turn became somewhat of a troublemaker. His mother, Sarah, sought to remedy her son's bad behavior. His parents got a piano, and Sarah arranged for lessons for Arthur from a woman nearby. Arthur soon came to realize that music was a way to fit in and stand out. The piano did not keep Arthur's attention for long. He regularly skipped school and one day saw a performance at a local vaudeville theater. One of the musicians played a tune named Dreamy Melody. This stylish performance by the musician had a profound effect on young Arthur. After weeks of convincing his parents and a whole summer working to earn the money, Arthur bought a saxophone from a local music shop for about $40. Arthur learned how to play by listening and playing along with popular saxophone recordings at the time, and soon he began playing with other local boys. His hard work gained him some recognition by a member of the Johnny Cavallaro Orchestra, who heard him playing and arranged an audition for Arthur with Cavallaro himself. Arthur was hired, and during his time with the Cavallaro Orchestra, made some impactful life decisions. First, the 15-year-old Arthur Arshowski, now a professional musician, changed his name to Artie Shaw because, in those days, it was hard to get work if you were a Jew in America. In addition, he had to learn how to double on the clarinet. The Cavallaro Orchestra had a winter-long engagement during the 1926-1927 season in Florida, and Artie began to learn the clarinet on the trip there. This period in Artie's life was the nexus of a decade-long career, from about 1926 to 1936. He toured the United States with various bands and eventually found himself mostly in the recording studios of New York City. In 1936, just as swing was becoming a nationwide sensation, 26-year-old Artie Shaw formed his first band. It was made up of a jazz rhythm section, a string quartet, and Shaw's clarinet. He'd been hired to play a short tune during a set change at a swing concert at New York's Imperial Theater. Leading up to this performance, Shaw may have been jealous of his unofficial rival, Benny Goodman, who was already leading a successful orchestra. The Imperial Theater concert was Artie's chance to prove to most of his peers that he could put on a show just as good as Benny's, if not better, and do it in his own way. Shaw came to enjoy the sound of clarinet and strings together. This gave him the idea to write a piece using this instrumentation as a jazz combo. The result, and what he showed off at the Imperial Theater, was his Interlude in B-flat. Shaw's new piece featured him on solo clarinet, along with a string quartet and a 3-piece rhythm section. Interlude in B-flat was unique for its time in that it blended elements of jazz and classical music. The piece he wrote for his unusual group created a sensation. Shaw was invited to record the composition, but he was forced to expand his ensemble to compete with the big swing bands. The group's unusual sound and instrumentation failed to catch on, and Shaw disbanded it. Shaw wanted to offer something just a tiny bit different from the other, more standard acts of the concert. It was this decision and this piece that launched his career as a band leader. Immediately after the Imperial Theater concert, he was approached by several music agencies wanting to sign the budding clarinetist. He ended up signing with the O'Keefe Agency, and within a few weeks, Artie was recording for Brunswick Records. His group was billed as Artie Shaw and his Orchestra. Shaw and his band had gigs mostly in New York City, but they also traveled to Dallas for what became a disastrous engagement. Most of their shows failed to bring in big crowds, and Artie realized that his band was not as popular as the louder swing bands like Goodman's. Shaw wrote in his biography about a realization he had after being scolded by a venue manager for failing to draw in customers with his music. It doesn't matter what you do or how good you are, as long as you can earn money for the fellow who hires you. This came as a shattering disillusionment, as he finally realized he wasn't in the music business. He was in the entertainment business. After only a few months, Shaw disbanded his group and vowed to give the public what they wanted. From 1937 to 1938, Shaw had his own big band titled Artie Shaw and His New Music, and though his new ensemble caused a stir in the music world, they were still left in relative obscurity to the public. In 1938, Shaw's contract was not renewed with Brunswick, and in the same year he signed with RCA Victor. Despite Jim Crow segregation, which made touring with racially integrated bands practically impossible, Shaw courageously took his band on the road with Billie Holiday as his female vocalist. Unfortunately, the results were often highly unpleasant, as this giant of American song was forced to eat her meals on the bus while the other musicians enjoyed a restaurant, and she frequently lodged in someone's home while the rest of the band stayed in a hotel. It was evident the country wasn't ready, and Holiday left because of the prejudice she experienced on the road. One of the first songs recorded by Artie Shaw and his orchestra for RCA Victor was the Cole Porter tune, Begin the Beguine. The song was from Cole Porter's musical. The story is unclear of how Begin the Beguine came to be in Artie Shaw's repertory, but many of Shaw's band members from that time later claimed responsibility for the song's inclusion. Shaw brushed aside these accounts. Nonetheless, a recording manager for RCA had said it would be a complete waste of time to record it. However, with some changes that made it more accessible as a swing tune, it became one of the most popular songs from that era. In fact, it was the #1 selling record of 1938. One of the changes Shaw made to the tune was its timing, making it an easier dance tune. It became a staple of the swing era and established Shaw as a contender for Benny Goodman's crown. Shaw's orchestra became the most popular band in America, and he sold millions of records. With their recording of Begin the Beguine, Shaw and his orchestra became an overnight sensation, which led to more booked gigs and more frequent recording sessions. Artie was soon confronted by the less glamorous side of his celebrity status when crazed fans, or jitterbugs, would storm the stage, fight, and even create mobs to try to get close to him. These jitterbugs and the never-ending performances began to wear him down. The pace was killing him, although he was deeply ambivalent about the success for which he had longed, going so far as to give interviews in which he described his young fans as morons. Nothing he said or did could put them off, and by 1939 he was one of the most famous men in America. This is James from One Track Jazz, and this is the end of Part 1. Thanks for listening, and subscribe to be notified for Part 2.